Hello everyone, today we're going to take a look at the Marvel Legends 6-inch action figure of Havok. This is coming in the Bonebreaker Build-A-Figure wave with the really consistent X-Men logo branding at the front, at the top of the box, also an X-Men logo, down to the bottom, some product information, and onto the side we see Havok powering up in Rage, and at the back of the box we have the full version of that artwork, description of Havok's character, the other figures in the Bonebreaker Build-A-Figure wave, product information at the bottom, and finally on that last side is that same artwork. So let's go ahead and get this guy open. Out of the packaging, the figure is on the plastic tray. He comes with 2 drums and these will go to the Bonebreaker Build-A-Figure. He also has some new effect parts. And the bigger effect part is on a second tray that's behind the main figure on the front. The 2 smaller effect parts are cast in a transparent blue plastic and these let the light through quite well. These effect parts are made from a harder, more rigid plastic and you can tell by just knocking them against each other. Definitely quite different from the previous effects that we got, and these are a more flexible, pliable plastic. It's also a nice touch that these 2 effects are actually not the same sculpt at all. They are unique pieces and not even reflected from each other. These effect parts have holes in them, and you will just pop off Havok's hands, slide his forearms into those holes in the effect parts, and pop his hands back on. To make sure these effect parts stay upright and not swing down from their own weight, you simply slide them further up his forearm, and that will give you a more snug fit that will hold these effect parts in place. And his biggest accessory is of course an even larger version of those blast effects. This one comes with a peg. You simply look for the hole on the back of his torso and peg that big effect part in. And this effect part is awesome because now he's complete with an energy aura around him as he's blasting his powers. As for the sculpt of the figure, most of it is just a plain black plastic version of the Sunfire average body mold. The only new part of this figure is of course his head sculpt. So if this figure goes to clearance, there's probably quite a bit of custom potential with such a blank body. His head sculpt is really iconic, classic Havok with those ring elements on the top of his head. The rings all meet at the middle of his forehead where there is a feature that's painted in red. Mine has a scuff on it, so you might want to make sure to choose one that with better paint on the shelf. He's got a neutral expression on his face, and we can see the Hasbro digital dot matrix print work on his eyes as well as his eyebrows. So that's really sharp applications for blue in his eyes. The skin tone paint around his eyes as well as his mouth is also really sharply applied. They don't bleed into the black plastic for the rest of his head sculpt. And even on the sides of his head you could see that there are ears sculpted beneath the skin-tight outfit on the rest of his head. And of course the attachment of those rings on the top of his head are also neatly joined to the back of his head as well. There's decent definition of the muscles on the rest of his body, and because it's so blank, that muscle definition is definitely much needed to make this figure look interesting on your shelf. In the middle of his chest, of course, there's also a very sharply printed feature that is trademark of Havok. It's painted in white with blue lining, and there's also a subtle fade of that blue paint out of the sides of that feature. So this effect makes the middle of his chest look like it's glowing. The rest of his body is once again that same blank black plastic, and this is consistent with Havok's outfit. There's probably just a little bit of slight tonal differences between the black plastic used on his hips as compared to his thighs. And here is a quick side-by-side with other versions of Havok. On the left we have the Toy Biz version, and I have to say the new one is definitely an improvement on the Toy Biz one. The Toy Biz head sculpt had a strange expression, looking somewhere between hurt and disgusted. And the technology advances definitely look really obvious from the much new and improved Havok. And on the right we also have Havok in his X Factor outfit. So I'm really happy now to have Havok in 2 of his more classic outfits. The X Factor head does pop onto this body, however it sits a little high, so you might need to do some work if you want to use this head for a more modern version of Havok's outfit. He's got Marvel Legends standard articulation, and that's a ball hinge at the neck so that head goes 360. There's only very slight sideways tilt. The hinge allows him good range looking down as well as up. Butterfly joints at the shoulders so he can pull his arms quite a good bit forward as well as a good range backward. Swivel hinge at the shoulders so his arms go 360 and they also come out that far, and that's where the deltoid gets in the way with the joint. You can probably get it further out if you push it further back over here where the deltoid can slide into that butterfly joint. He's got a bicep swivel so his arm spins 360. Double hinge at the elbows, however it is pretty limited, just getting past 90 degrees. I'll try to touch on a small modification later on in this video to get more range out of that elbow. Swivel hinge at the wrist for 360 spin as well as articulating in as well as out. Mid-torso hinge for good ab crunch forward as well as backward bend. Swivel at the waist so you can spin him 360. Ball jointed hips that let you go out that far, which is pretty great. And also good range forward and backward. Swivel at the thigh and that gets you 360 spin. Double jointed knees that get you quite a good range. A swivel at the calf for 360 spin. He's got ankle tilt upwards as well as downwards. And finally ankle pivot outwards as well as inwards. So now let's jump into the quick elbow modification. I previously done that on a couple of Spider-Man action figures, but I'm repeating it over here just for your benefit. There is a triangular section at the middle joint of that elbow, and this triangle is actually preventing the elbows from bending much further than 90 degrees. You can see that the triangular section over here is causing interference with the slots in the joints of his upper and lower arms. So what you need to do is take a sharp hobby knife and make a V-shaped cut to get that triangular section out. The first cut will be from the lower part of his forearm, and then the next cut would be coming down from his bicep. So over here you can see that I have removed that plastic piece with that V-shaped cut, and you can knock off that piece of triangle plastic. And you can see at that mid-elbow section, the cut is pretty sharp, and you will want to take a round file just to round off that cut a little bit and protect the integrity of the joint. So now you can see that I have rounded off the cut in that elbow, and you can see how that compares with the original elbow over here. So this modified elbow gets you much better bend at the double hinge of the elbow, and then you can compare that range with the original elbow over here. So all you gotta do now is just to repeat that same process on the original elbow on the other side. So after the elbow mod, you should be able to add more elbow range on top of his typical Marvel Legends standard articulation scheme, and that definitely is much needed for a character like Havok, who expresses a lot of his powers through his hands. Havok stands at about 6¼ inches to the top of his head, and that's just under 16 centimeters. To the top of the rings on his head, that's about 6½ inches, and that's about 16½ centimeters. For size comparisons, he's actually shorter than his brothers Cyclops and Vulcan. Here he is with both versions of Polaris, Multiple Man and Wolverine, Mr. Sinister and Mystique, and finally we have Hulk and Thor. For comparisons with other lines, here he is with some G.I. Joe Classified series and Star Wars Black series. As an X-Men fan, this is a much needed update for a classic Havok. The beauty of this figure is in its simplicity and it's faithful to the character design. On top of that, we also get some brand new effect parts that work quite well with the figure. So in summary, this is a worthy addition to your collection and a must-have for X-Men fans. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, and subscribe to my channel for more toy reviews. Thanks for watching, take care and stay safe.